Welcome to the Pro Hockey Alumni Podcast, the home of behind-the-scenes interviews, stories, and memories that celebrate the heritage of the great game of hockey. The Pro Hockey Alumni Podcast is hosted by Mark Willand. Our first ever guest on the Pro Hockey Alumni Podcast is the sniper Blaine Stoughton, who had two 50-goal and two 40-goal seasons with the Hartford Whalers, along with a 52-goal campaign with the WHA Cincinnati Stingers. In addition to talking about his career highlights, we discuss his first impressions of two 17-year-old teammates in Indy, Wayne Gretzky and Mark MESSIER, the suspension for his attack on the notorious Paul Baxter, and somehow Playboy bunnies CHERYL TIEGS, Carol Alt, and even CHER make their way into the interview. Stash, let's pick things up in 1976. You're with the Toronto Maple Leafs. You're with a good young team with Lanny McDonald, Boyer Soloming, Darryl Sittler, and others. You make the decision to jump to the World Hockey Association with the Cincinnati Stingers in a relatively untested market. I was curious what your thought process was in jumping leagues.
Yeah, well, obviously, it's like any other contract issue. It's 90% of it. Your disagreement is about money and how long the contract and one way, two way. Because I wasn't at that juncture. I wasn't considered as a it was only my third year, considered as a automatic starter, if you want to put it that way. So, so that became an issue, and I was single, living in Canada. The taxes were very high in Canada, and I just got twice as much money, longer term, and my taxes were cut like 30%. So it was, you look back, maybe, WHA, should I stay in the NHL? I don't know, but you make those decisions, and it worked out for me. I married a girl from Cincinnati. My kids grew up here, so yeah, I got no regrets really.
Right, you shouldn't, seeing how you married Cindy Stoughton, and there are no
Correct.
regrets there. Yeah. So you would have been better otherwise.
No.
What were your first initial thoughts of the WHA, of the Stinger organization, and perhaps the comparison of the caliber of play between the two leagues?
Yeah. Well, I was very fortunate. It was our franchise was like some of them never struggled financially. In fact, the owner comes from old Cincinnati money. Bill DeWitt Jr. His dad owned the Reds years ago, and Mr. DeWitt owns the St. Louis Cardinals now. So we never struggled in terms of, are we going to fold, or are we going to get paid, or any of those kind of things like other. Funny when you're in a non-traditional hockey city like Cincinnati. Yeah, you watch the sports, and they talk about high school basketball before they talk about hockey. You're going, it's just just an environment you're not used to, and so we used to laugh about that all the time. But yeah, you get used to it. Now the pressure, there's two ways to look at it. There's less pressure in a market like this too, and same when I was in Hartford. There's less pressure there is in like New York or Toronto, Montreal, and so yeah, you adjust. And I really enjoyed it here. We had a young team. I think we only had like 3 or 4 married guys in the whole team, so we're all young. We enjoyed our own company and going out after games and stuff. So yeah, I enjoyed my time in Cincinnati. I still live here, actually.
Right. It was an exciting time. I mean, I used to listen to the games on Radio 700 WLW with Andy McWilliams, and it was a fun and exciting team that year. You started out, of course, eventually on the LSD line with Richie LeDuc and Rick Dudley, and then ended up on what they call the Bunny line with Greg Carroll and Peter Marsh. Perhaps you could tell the folks how that name came about.
Yeah. Well, I That's a funny story. I was going out with a friend of Cindy's just before I met Cindy, the Playboy Club, and she, the girl I was going out, couldn't make it to it was a boxing promotion, and they go around putting up what round it is,
right?
And so Cindy was one of the ring girls, and this was before cell phones, so the girl I was supposed to meet after the game, she couldn't get a hold of me, so I'm sitting there waiting for her after the game, and I can't see her, and then all of a sudden Cindy walks up there. So that's how I met her, and so then we started hanging around the Playboy Club, and eventually Greg and Marshy ended up dating from Playboy's bunnies too. So yeah, that's how it started.
It's good to be a Stinger in '76, that's for sure.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, we had a lot of fun.
But kind of an interesting scenario unfolds from there. We go into the off season, the NHL WHA merger, which included the Stingers originally, doesn't happen. And then an interesting dynamic changes with the Stingers. You add some great classic WHA talent, Robbie Ftorek, Pat Stapleton, among others.
Yeah.
But you also add a head coach, Jacques Demers, who's known for being a defensive-minded coach with the Indianapolis Racers. And it seemed to me at that time to be kind of a mismatch for the talent that you had on the team. I was curious if you agreed with that, what your thoughts were about that transition.
Yeah. Well, it's funny. Because I lived here in the summertime. Me and Dudley were the only guys that lived here in the summertime. So I was here when they hired him, and I went out. I think we played golf together or something. And he told me we're going to play more defensive, but don't worry. If you don't score goals, that doesn't matter. Well, that wasn't true because I ended up getting traded. But I learned a valuable lesson from that. From moving forward, I said to myself, I'll listen to coaches, right, and try and implement their game plan. But inside that game plan, I'm going to play my own game. And I learned a valuable lesson that when I listened to Mr. Demers, which helped me as I moved forward.
Right. It was a interesting time. I recently ran into Paul Stewart. You were talking about it, of course.
Yeah.
Your franchise, the whole thing went from Dennis Sobchuk, Blaine Stoughton, Claude LaRose to all of a sudden it's Paul Stewart, Bruce Gregg, Alf Handrahan. All of a sudden we go from one extreme to the other.
Yeah.
And I was curious, the game that kind of set that off was the Thanksgiving night massacre down at Birmingham.
Yeah.
And I was curious if you had any memories of that game.
Yeah, no, I remember it vividly. Yeah, it was. Birmingham they had a lot of young guys back then, and they had a lot of tough guys because they didn't want these kids were 17, like Mark Napier and kids like that, Ricky Vave. So they had a lot of tough guys just to protect these young kids, and obviously they went overboard in that area, but. We had a big brawl there, and our general manager and our ownership group, the DeWitt, said, they came to the locker room after the game. They said, "Don't worry, that'll never happen again." So, we went and started getting our own crew.
Right. It's kind of it's kind of like an arms race, the WH at that point, because now they've got. They had just traded to the NHL. They just traded Vaclav Nedomansky and Tim Sheehy. And now they had Steve Durbano, Frank Beaton, Dave Hansen, Bad News Bilodeau. And, I was listening to the game on that Thanksgiving night, and it was literally at the drop of the puck. Five guys get jumped, including, like, Robbie Ftorek, who's like, 5'6" or something. Yeah. And all heck breaks loose. Demers, I remember, basically throws the stick rack out on the ice. And Andy McWilliams is going ballistic. And I felt like from that point on, the WHA kind of changed, especially for that season, and certainly the Stingers' fortunes. You end up in Indianapolis in an interesting circumstance, and you kind of then become kind of an answer to a couple of trivia questions, which is who played with Wayne Gretzky as a rookie and Gordie Howe in his last year. You also played with Mark Messier as a rookie. But I was curious what your thoughts were of 17-year-old Wayne Gretzky, when he came to Indy.
Yeah. It was funny. Well, you know how Wayne plays. He's not, and I explained this to a lot of Americans that are kind of naive about hockey. He's not like Magic Johnson. He's like Larry Bird. And so he is, you know how he played.
Right.
He uses his head. I mean, I would average skater, average shot, everything was average about him, except his brain. I think he's the smartest hockey player that ever played the game. And he had good edge work too. But I think his biggest asset was how smart he was.
Right.
And,
I think that's a good.
So
yeah, it's a good analogy between Gretzky and Bird. That's a very good analogy.
Yeah, and so you really don't see that in practice, you know. And you know, he was skinny. You know, he still had pimples, and if you look the way he skates, he doesn't have a perfect angle of his back. You know, he was hunched over a little too far, and
Right.
But as soon as the game started, right, is a different story. Then he could use his intellect, and so yeah, you could tell it's just a matter of time.
Do you remember Messier at all? He was such a quiet player when he first came over.
Yeah, yeah.
Do you recall him at all?
Yeah, I think the first thing he was a big kid, even at 18 years old. Very, you know, he wasn't a big scorer back then, but very strong in the puck. You know, I think his skills developed a little later, but I never seen what happened to him. I never seen that. I thought he'd be like a, you know, second line, you know, kind of a tough, not a tough guy, but a grinding guy.
Right.
Maybe 15, 20 goals, but you know, he had a great attitude. So you know, I thought he'd be a valuable player on a team, but never to that amount.
Right. No, I don't think you were alone on that. The Oilers drafted him in the second round the year after that, and he only had 1 goal in 52 games that year.
Right.
Dump in from center ice, so you never know. He's only 17, so you know, who's to say?
Yeah.
That's incredible. Now, when you when Gretzky was traded, I heard this story a while ago. I think Larry Gordon said it, that Gretzky went to Edmonton with Peter Driscoll and Ed Mio. However,
yeah.
I also heard they had originally wanted to have Blaine Stoughton as part of that transaction. Did you ever hear that story?
Yeah, I heard it from a scout. Oh, where the heck were we? I think it was the All-Star game in Hartford when after I retired.
Right.
I don't know what year that would have been. And I ran into an Edmonton scout and said, yeah, I was in the discussions. And then they wanted Driscoll because they needed some toughness.
Right.
And remember Peter Driscoll? He was kind of a tough guy. So they decided to get a little more toughness because they thought they had enough goal scoring. But yeah, what a career change that would have been for me.
That's for sure. You never know. But, you know, interestingly enough, you do end up with the WHA, a very stable franchise in the New England Whalers, who pick you up when the Racers go under. But I was curious, when you first came over to Hartford, then playing in Springfield, what your thoughts were of the franchise and how things kind of flowed for you that first year in New England.
I don't know how many goals I scored the first year, but well, we had Gordie, and there's a lot of vets on our team, John McKenzie, and I think I was playing on the third line, and I don't even know who my center was, but Bill Dineen, I respect him. He's a tough guy. He made me earn my ice time, and he also liked defensive players to play. You know, you got to play good defense to play
right.
for him. So I struggled a little bit. I don't think he really, you know, I didn't have his trust, you know, to put me out there in certain situations. So I don't know how many goals I scored that year. But then we had Larry Plow, and he was a little more lenient in terms of letting me play my own game. And then when Don Blackburn became coach, that's when I really excelled, because he understood my mindset, and that's what made me hungry to play hockey, was to score goals.
Right.
I mean, I could be a checker. It's not that hard to do, but it didn't excite me. It just wasn't in my genes to be,
right.
to be a checker. So, and that's when I really flourished under Don Blackburn. And we had a system where, you know, I could get in deep all the time, and one of the other two guys would stay high. So they to cover for me from being in deep all the time. So, yeah, it worked out good.
Very few players came over to the NHL, especially veteran players, who dramatically increased their production, and you were one of the very few. Mike Rogers was another, not coincidentally. So you go into 79-80, you end up with an amazing 56 goals, tied for the league lead with Charlie Simmer, Danny Gare, 100 points, teaming with Mike Rogers and eventually Pat Boutette, the Stash Bash and Dash line. It had to be a special season for you, year one back in the NHL.
Yeah, it really was. It was ironic. I was playing center with Andre Lacroix. Yeah, I was playing center with Andre Lacroix, and we were playing in Colorado, and we were down like 3-2 or something with a minute to go, and Blackie put me and Mike Rogers out there, and we scored the winner. I mean, the tying goal. And so the next practice, he put us together, and boom, we just took off. We just had some unique chemistry that you just don't see it in practice. There's no way to know when someone's going to click like that. But yeah, it was accidental, actually.
Both you guys hit the 100-point mark. And again, that was rare at the time, because most of the guys came over. You know, it's a little different league, whether it be Real Cloutier or Anders Hedberg, whatever. You know, numbers went down a little bit. League's a little more defensive.
Yeah.
And but your scoring just exploded. Now, it's also
well, it helped. I think it helped me that, like, Cloutier and those guys, they'd never played in the NHL before, though. They went like from junior to the WHA.
Good point.
And I'd played it before, so I think I had a little advantage on those guys. Like, same as Dennis Savchuk. He went from junior, I think, to Phoenix in the WHA, but he never played in the NHL, and he struggled too. So I think that might have been an advantage that I had a couple of years in the NHL when I was younger.
WHA is pretty good by the time the league was over. You only had 6 teams, a lot of good young talent. How would you compare the two from a player standpoint?
Well, obviously it was more wide open, and the WHA, I think they didn't focus on good defensemen enough. Most of they like guys that can move the puck, score points. It sells tickets. It's more entertaining, and I think that was the goal of a lot of the owners and general managers, is to create more offense, and from the defensive side, you know, when you want to create more production, you got to have skilled D. Not necessarily they're not great in their own end, but they can move the puck and be effective as a fourth forward in the offensive zone. So I think that was part of their game plan.
Well, after that great 79-80 campaign, you discover a loophole in your player's contract that leads you to become a restricted free agent in missing the first month or so of the 1980-81 season.
Yeah. Well, when the merger came, the commissioner sent all the agents, all the general managers that every WHA contract, right, should be the same terms and everything, but you got to be put on an NHL contract. And my WHA contract said there's no compensation for me, right? Once my contract expired, there was no compensation.
Right.
So basically, I wanted to be a free agent with no compensation. And their argument, well, when you sign an NHL contract, there is compensation. And my argument was, well, you never signed me to one. So under the contract I have signed, there's no compensation. I can sign with any team I want. And that's why I went to court, to try and be. I want to be my goal is to be a free agent with no compensation.
Right.
And the commissioner ruled against it.
Well, once you rejoined the lineup that year, you had another very productive year with Mike Rogers. However, to begin the following season, 81-82, Mike Rogers is traded away, but he's replaced by a young kid from Sault Ste. Marie, Ron Francis.
Well, we got along right away on and off the ice. I was a little older, like 26 maybe, but I got along with his parents real well. They would always call me and, hey, how's Ron doing? You know, so we kept in good contact with his parents because, you know, he's 18, you know, living in the States. They were worried about him. So I kind of kept an eye on him, make sure everything was okay off the ice. And but regarding on the ice, I could tell, you know, our first practice, I never thought he could be like that, how good he ended up. But I knew this guy was a first-line all-star centerman. I could tell after the very first practice. When he'd pass, it was on my stick every time. I didn't have to move it, and they were hard too. So he could pass the puck hard, right on the tape every time.
Right.
And I just told him a little bit how I like to play, and like I don't like to carry the puck that much. And he said, great, because, you know, he loved carrying the puck, and he was good at it.
Right.
So just coming out of our own end, my job was to get on the boards and try and get him the puck, and then let him do the work till we got over the offensive blue line. And that was his niche too. He loved carrying the puck through the neutral zone, and he had great vision. He was strong. So the chemistry was just perfect. We got along great on and off the ice. So yeah, he's a good guy, real great guy.
While playing alongside Ron Francis, you returned to the 50-goal plateau. However, the next season, once again, as you did in 80-81, you missed pretty much the first month of the season, this time due to a suspension over an incident with the notorious Paul Baxter in Johnstown, PA.
Yeah. Well, we had a history long before the NHL. I played with Flin Flon Bombers, and he played for the Winnipeg Jets. And that was a huge rivalry when the old building in Winnipeg held like 10-5, I think. And when we came there to play Winnipeg, the rink was sold out every game when Flin Flon came to town. And, you know, Paul, as he is, you know, and I was a big goal scorer back then, so he was always trying to intimidate me. So me and him had a history going back when we were 17 years old. And, you know, after you retire, everybody's good friends, but
Right.
he didn't like me then, and I didn't like, you know, we didn't like each other back then.
Right.
And so the ice, we were playing in, what the hell was that town, where they filmed Slapshot?
Johnstown.
Johnstown, yeah. So we're playing in Johnstown. You know what that rink's like. Right. And the ice was just awful. So the two captains met before the game, and they said, hey, guys, let's just, you know, play like it's a practice, you know. You don't hit each other. Make good passes, play hard, but don't run anybody, you know, because the ice is so bad. So sure enough, I'm out there, right, and Paul's out there. So I'm going through the neutral zone, and there's water I could stick hand without looking at the puck when I was 16. So, I'm not going to put my head down if the ice is good. But the puck hit some water, and it slowed down and went into my feet. And I looked down to see where the puck was. Here he came across and ran me. So, I mean, I just, actually what happened to that, I probably don't even remember. But I just looked up, and he was skating behind the net. I skated as fast as I could and just cross-checked. And that's what I got 10 games for.
Right. Which, despite missing the 10 games, you still end up with, again, well over 40 goals again. And things are going along well. However, at the beginning of the 83-84 season, Whalers have a new regime, and your ice time gets reduced.
Yeah. And it was back to, when I was playing for Jacques Demers. I don't think they liked my style of play. And they talked to me about it, and I didn't tell them why I wouldn't change but I've just told you because I learned my lesson once already.
Right.
And I basically said, listen, no, that's not going to happen. I don't enjoy playing like a 1-2-2. I mean, for me to stand out in the blue line playing a 1-2-2 is not my game. I get bored. I don't feel challenged.
Right.
And I have to play a 2-1 game. And they said, oh, that's not going to happen here, and blah, 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 blah. I said, well, man, no, I'm going to keep playing. And then so they put me down one line. I keep playing the same way. And then, eventually it came to, they said, well, we're going to have to trade you. And I said, fine.
Now, I'm going to pick that up in 1 minute. But one story I forgot to ask you about real quickly was the end of the previous season, the last game of the previous season. The Whalers are in the running for having the worst record in the league at that point. But you play Buffalo, you've got a penalty shot, and being Blaine Stoughton, you're pretty relaxed about your chances of getting this goal. John Cuniff on the bench, not so relaxed. Yeah. Can you kind of recall that story?
Yeah, it's funny. I got I think I had a breakaway with about 50 seconds to go or something, and I got tripped. So they point to center ice, so I go over the bench, and they're getting the puck ready. And I think there's about maybe 45 seconds, a minute before I'm going to take the shot. And so I stand by the boards, and John, he's pacing up and down the bench, biting his fingernails and everything. I said, John, what's the matter? He said, what do you mean, what's the matter? I said, don't worry about it. I'm going to score. I said, but actually, I'll tell you where I'm going to score. He says, would you be serious for 1 second? This is the NHL. I'm going, don't worry about it. I said, hey, $10, I'll score on the low stick side. He says, he's just going ballistic because he couldn't believe how relaxed I was and everything. He was all nervous. So, yeah. So sure enough, I go in there and I kind of dipped my shoulder like I was going to go 5-hole. And he closed the 5-hole, and I threw it right along the ice on the stick side. So we went in the locker room. We had fun with that with all the guys because they heard me on the bench talking to John. So we had a good time with that.
Right. Yeah. Well, I can picture that. I can picture Cunny being a little type A. And
yeah, he is.
So it was he was a good man. You just reminded me of a story. However, I wanted to clear up for our listeners because I didn't actually know this until I had heard the story about 7 or 8 years ago. How you actually earned that nickname Stash. I always assumed just because you always had the stash going, but in fact that wasn't the case.
No. When I was playing in Toronto. I forget who we were playing, but you ever notice in a tight game, guys that they get nervous and they throw the puck away all the time. I think a lot of times they're afraid of failure. And I was a goal scorer ever since I was 14 or 15.
Right.
And I've had breakaways and lost games and missed open nets and lost games. So I was kind of used to that environment. So we were playing in Toronto. The guys were passive all over the place. Nobody wanted to handle it. And I forget who we were playing. And it was like 3-3. And I said, guys, don't throw the puck away in the offense. So just give the effing puck to me, and I'll stash in the net, and we'll win, go home, have a couple of beers. So sure enough, that's what happened. So then Daryl Sitley, he nicknamed me Stash.
Oh, okay. I didn't know the Sittler had gave you that nickname. It certainly stuck over the years. Well, the trading deadline in 1984, conclusion of the 83-84 season, you're sent to the New York Rangers for Scott Kleinendorst, where your coach is Herb Brooks, who was still adjusting to coaching pro players after his great success at the amateur level. And I remember one anecdote vaguely, which included a limo and runway models, CHER, Barry Beck. Could you refresh my memory on that story?
Yeah, it was funny because I was commuting from Hartford. I would stay one day in the hotel. So I'd practice, stay a night in the hotel, then practice, then I'd drive home. So I was kind of commuting back and forth from Hartford. So I'd get there early in the morning. And it was about maybe 9 o'clock, and the practice was at 11. And I was just sitting there reading the paper. And in the paper it said, they used to have page 6. I don't know if they have it anymore in the New York Post.
Right.
And it's talking about what's going on in the social world and nightclubs and that. So I'm reading there and said, oh my, said last night, Gresh, Bubba, and Duguay were seen at Studio 54 with Carol Walt and Cheryl TIEGS and CHER and all that. I'm going, oh my God, these guys, I'm thinking to myself, these guys aren't going to do well in practice today. And so sure enough, so then I'm sitting and Herb pulls up Scarver, just, BS and, how you doing? How's the family and all that? And he's facing me and I'm looking out towards the parking lot and he's looking at me. I don't know if you've ever been there, but towards the ocean there, and I'm looking out towards the park. And here comes this limo around the corner, and the music. When you've had a couple of cold ones, how you turn that music up a little.
Right.
So and Herb hears this music. He turns around, and the 3 girls get out of the car first. Cheryl TIEGS, Alt, and CHER. So the 3 of them, they get out of the limo, and the smoke's coming out of there, and so I just stared at Herb's face. Oh my! He went completely white. His face went completely white.
I can imagine.
Anyway, yeah. So they went to practice. They got kicked off practice and stuff. Oh, it was hilarious. Yeah, from my perspective, it was hilarious. I don't think it was from Herb's.
No, a little culture shock from coaching college kids to Studio 54.
He struggled. Yeah.
Now, despite the fact you were still a productive goal scorer, you're cut out of training camp with the Rangers the following season and spend the entire year with the New Haven Nighthawks of the American Hockey League. Had to be a disappointing season for you to end your pro career in New Haven with the Nighthawks.
Yes and no. But, I went through so many guys that retired, and I had 2 young kids then. And sitting out, we always said, whenever the last year came, we were going to enjoy it, don't matter, where we are or wherever. So we made the best of it. I was busy with you got 2 kids, what that's like. So we enjoyed our that time in New Haven. And a lot of people didn't know this, but I pulled my stomach muscle in training camp in New York. And, the sports hernia, they didn't even call it that back then. But,
right.
And I had that, and I couldn't get rid of it either. I mean, I should have stopped playing, but I thought, I'll just push through. And actually, after when I retired, I was living in Florida. It was sore for like 3, because I played tennis. It was sore for 3 years after I quit playing. I just couldn't get rid of it.
It's also one of those injuries that nobody can see, and you reminded me of Sylvain Turgeon, who in 1986 had a similar injury, and a lot of people were accusing him of malingering out there and dogging it, and he kept insisting he was in a lot of pain and he couldn't shake it. And but that's interesting. I didn't know you had dealt with that as well. You end up coaching. You end up actually owning a team in Austin, Texas. You come back to New England eventually, and you coach with Joel Quenneville with Springfield for a couple of years. Yeah. Now Joel is, of course, second all time right now, I believe, in coaching wins in the NHL. I was curious if you saw those qualities in his first year of coaching that would end up so he would end up where he is right now with Chicago.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Clean was, not the greatest skilled guy in his playing days, but he was very intelligent. He was always in the right position, made the right plays, just a smart player. And when I coached him that year, he was very prepared. Probably knew the game better than I did, and very dedicated. The team was always ready. He had them ready to play. They didn't know what they were doing or what's my assignment. Everybody knew what their job was. Everybody knew the assignments. Everybody knew the system. So, once again, I never thought he'd be this successful. But after about 3 months, I knew he was going to be an NHL coach. Right. I actually thought it was going to be in Hartford, but anyway. Yeah. No, he deserves. He deserves all the accolades he gets. He's a real smart guy.
Well, I'm glad to see that you and Cindy and your family have settled in the Cincinnati area. And recently I was managing a hockey camp up in Worcester, Massachusetts, ran into a family who play hockey in the Cincinnati area, and they tell me that your granddaughter is quite a young hockey player.
Yeah, she's doing good. She's 8. She plays on a boys' travel team. So.
Oh, good. Does she have the killer instinct from the blue line in, as her grandfather?
Oh yeah, yeah. No, she likes scoring, and she's got good instincts. But the best part is she's aggressive. Even with the boys.
Right.
When she falls down, she just gets ready to back up, and she battles in the corners. So I think she's got that competitive spirit in her too, which any athlete has to have.
Right. Oh, absolutely. And scoring goals, it's not easy work. It's another part of the game, but you have to be extremely physical, especially yourself. If you look back at your career in Hartford, for example, where you kind of didn't get the recognition around the league simply because you're playing in Hartford. But when you're scoring goals and you're kind of the goal scorer on the team, then you're getting a lot of attention from a lot of good defensive players, a lot of good physical players in the other team. It takes a lot of work, and obviously something you took pride in, and something you certainly excelled at.
Yeah, it's funny. My wife, she's from Cincinnati, and she didn't know that much about hockey, and she'd always say, "Why are you letting those guys hit you like that? Why don't you hit them back and everything?" I said, "Well, I can score 20 goals a year, or I can score 50. If I hit them back, right, I'm in the penalty box all the time. I'll score 20."
Right.
It took her about 5 years to understand what I was doing in front of the net.
When you're in front of that net and you're in those scoring areas, especially back then, where interference was a lot more liberal, getting from point A to point B was it was difficult.
Games changed a lot now, and it's actually for the better, I guess. But I really enjoy watching it now. Yeah, hockey's great. These guys are. I use the analogy that when I played, we were hockey players. All right. These guys are athletes.
Yes.
These guys that play now, we played hockey and that was it.
Right.
But these guys are just unbelievable athletes, and it shows on the ice.
Yeah. The pace of the game is mind-boggling sometimes, especially you watch it now on a high definition TV. And, these guys are just flying. They're in shape 12 months a year. So they're a little bit different. Just had a couple more quick questions for you. I was curious if you, I know back in the day with the Whalers, you were good friends with guys like Pierre LaRouche, Russ Anderson, Coetzee. Do you ever stay in touch with any of your former Whaler teammates?
Yeah, actually, I seen Pierre about 3 weeks ago. We were in, my granddaughter was playing in Pittsburgh. I've seen him, and I talked to Coetzee and Russ all the time, Mike Liut. Yeah, I keep in touch.
That's good.
Peter Marsh. Yeah. So, we keep in touch. Mostly I see him in the summertime. Like I go to Chicago every year. There's a horse race there, the Arlington Million. Yeah. And I always go to Chicago, and we go to the Cubs game and go to the Arlington Million. I see Peter there. So, it's fun talking about old times.
Absolutely. There's a lot of fun things to talk about. And, of course, if I had another 2 hours, I could keep asking you questions and hearing them, but I won't do that to you. I do appreciate taking the time today, and I know the fans do as well. We always keep track of you and on Facebook, of course, and every time I can dig up some old video for the WHA site and what have you, I always enjoy putting up some Blaine Stoughton highlights up there online. So we'll continue to search the archives for.
I appreciate that.
Well, Stash, it was great to catch up with you. It's been a few years, and you're a big part of Hartford hockey history, big part of Cincinnati hockey history. We really appreciated you taking the time today. Enjoyed the heck out of watching you play as a player, and hope to get a chance to talk to you again real soon.
Oh, it was my pleasure. I'm glad to do it.
All right, Blaine. Take care. We'll talk to you soon.
All right. Thanks.
Thanks. Bye-bye. Thanks for listening to the Pro Hockey Alumni Podcast. Be sure to visit us at prohockeyalumni.org.